Andrew Demeter here, reporting on September 4th, 2013, and I just wanted to share my thoughts with you guys regarding the Syrian conflict unfolding and the imminent U.S. intervention into Egypt regarding these scary chemical weapons that Bashar al-Assad is alleged to be using, when truthfully we know it's the Syrian rebels funded and armed by our own United States government, which just gives you a really warm feeling in your heart, right? Anyways, let's get started. So, pretty much if anybody out there is actually in tune with reality and not just these celebrities that we're supposed to blindly externalize our energy towards, then you probably know that there was actually a Senate hearing held yesterday on Capitol Hill in D.C., and John Kerry was pretty much the main character of this hearing, of this conference. So with that said, many of the liberally inclined news outlets were actually claiming that, John Kerry was answering all these questions by Congress with much ease and comfortability, when truthfully, if anybody was actually watching this on TV, you could see that Kerry was sweating bullets, or really cruise missiles, and also he was shuffling papers, hiding his head and face in his hands, so just ridiculous telltale signs of a liar and somebody who's truly nervous to be confronted with the facts of a situation. Now, going further from that, I just wanted to pretty much break down Kerry's basis of his arguments and his rebuttals to logic that were truthfully illogical in this situation, but I'll get to that in a minute. But before I do dive into that, I just wanted to say it's completely contradictory, completely paradoxical in this circumstance that the United States is indebted itself about $16 trillion into deficit, and the government has allegedly rescued America from this fiscal cliff of the economic collapse. But at the same time, when Obama's canceling White House tours for students who want to visit their nation's capital in the belly of the beast, well, he's canceling that and embargoing this ban on 6-ounce liquid to be taken on planes for the TSA. Terrorists can run rampant now that we have a sequester. But in light of all that, he's saying, because the government can't spend a lot of money, we're going to let all this evil run rampant in our society, but, we're still gonna spend money that we don't have on a $1.5 million cruise missile, if not multiple cruise missiles, to not even spread peace throughout the Middle East, but instead just further this idea of military violence and intervention to pretty much unfold in the Middle East, in Egypt, for innocent people to die, and just pretty much what we do every day here in America, because that is the new America, the land of the free and home of the brave. We bomb people, we kill people, and that's pretty much our repertoire as of right now. So, even after mentioning the sequester and all these budget cuts, Obama is still vacationing to Martha's Vineyard, Africa, and even his new $2,000 purebred Aryan pup is actually being transported to these vacation destinations in an entirely separate military aircraft. I mean, how ridiculous is that? There's people starving in Africa, let alone America itself, and it just shows this stark contrast between the higher caste system and the lower class of the 99%, and it's absolutely disgusting, especially in light of these Egyptian conflicts and just innocent people dying in mass, really. Now, other than that, I find it entirely counterintuitive at really minimum when you think about this. Now, the Obama administration has been saying, we're going to bomb and intervene into Syria for these rebels and remediate these rebels' violence because, we're trying to help them. I mean, how much sense does it make to say, in context of events like 9/11 and the Boston bombing, because you lost a limb, because one of your limbs got blown off, we're going to cut off the other one because it'll help you? Last time I checked, adding violence to more violence, adding insult to injury, doesn't really help someone out in the long run, as opposed to perhaps offering medical care. But the government is illogical, and that's how it has been for quite a while now. And on the subject of complete counterintuitiveness and this notion of just radical people pretty much and acting outside of the law, John McCain, Senator John McCain, because we have to use the official term now, he was at this Senate hearing, and he paid so much attention to this whole hearing that he was actually playing poker on his iPhone. Yes, folks, you've heard that right. It is completely substantiated by the mainstream outlets as well, and when they start covering the grit, you know things have hit the fan. So John McCain, a prisoner of war himself, and someone who abets the NDAA, which, according to that logic and according to that legislation, John McCain himself should actually be considered a terrorist for visiting these Syrian rebels, but he was actually playing poker on his iPhone and kind of so absorbed in a video game as opposed to the true video game that is reality, that is the murdering and assassination of innocent children and people in general. So I found that pretty disconcerting, that he's not even willing to bat an eye to the astronomical proportions of the impending World War III, and instead he decides to be preoccupied by a simple video game on his cell phone. And even after he was playing on his cell phone at the Senate meeting, he actually tweeted out that, quote, "Scandal, caught playing iPhone game at 3-hour plus Senate hearing. Worst of all, I lost." Well, is John McCain the true loser in this situation? Personally, I don't think so. Instead, the American people are the victims here. They're the ones suffering because due to this intervention to take place in Syria against these radical chemical attacks being perpetrated by Bashar al-Assad, which is entirely false, then we're suffering as an American people because these other nations like Syria, like Israel, think that we, the American people, consent to this violence being perpetuated throughout the world, when truthfully we don't. Predominantly, a great deal of Americans actually oppose this war, this intervention, this meddling with foreign affairs in Syria, and I am definitely one of those supporters, along with Ron Paul and many other logical libertarians out there. And stemming from that, too, the government never loses, like I said, because Obama, even if this congressional, what does he call it, this congressional resolution, which is kind of funny, I got a giggle out of it when I heard that type of verbiage being passed around, but even if this resolution isn't resolved or cleared in Congress, then Obama still has the audacity, the entire constitutional seemingly power at this point, to pass an executive order where, without judicial or legislative oversight, we can simply go to war. So yeah, Obama is the commander-in-chief, and I mean, I guess he can do that now, because he has pretty much assumed the role of God at this point. Now, continuing on, and by the way, I encourage you all to call your members of Congress, call the White House, call Barack Obama himself, even though it's just some automated voicemail, and let everybody know, let our representatives that truly don't represent us at this point, John McCain playing on his iPhone while being funded for his salary by taxpayer bucks, they don't really represent us, but at least we can have our voice heard, and that is what we truly need at this day and age. So, continuing on, Kerry, I don't know if you guys know, but Secretary of State John Kerry actually met with Bashar al-Assad as well as his wife in Egypt in 2011, and I was thinking maybe when Obama signs this executive order to intervene in Syria, maybe al-Assad could tag along with Kerry, and they could have some reminiscing of this date night they had back in 2011, maybe to the clinking of glasses and champagne, and possibly even an appetizer of the finest brewed bottles of sodium silicate fluoride from refined phosphate industries. And if any of you don't get that reference, now the American government or American media outlets and Syria as well have actually admitted, other than gas, to have used sodium silicate fluoride in this chemical warfare. Yes, folks, that is the same type of fluoride used in toothpaste, used in drinking water. They were supposed to drink 8 8-ounce glasses of it per day. It's poison. And this is entirely a different debate, but nonetheless, it's absolutely ludicrous that something that we're supposed to be drinking and brushing our teeth with, as recommended by doctors and dentists, is a chemical used in warfare to kill people violently. Where is the logic in this? Well, there is none. And when we're discussing that Kerry had this rendezvous with Assad a while back, and people are saying, oh, well, these chemical attacks, the U.S. government didn't know about them prior to the past 2 months or so, that's entirely false, because since the early onset of the 70s, a few decades now in the making, these chemical weapons have been utilized in Syria. So to say that, oh, the government just now knows about it is entirely false, and they've been used all along. So where does the logic play in that? It's just mind-boggling to me, and will continue to do so until the end of time. And then another funny thing that I read, another contradiction of the administration's narrative that they try to peddle throughout the media via Project Mockingbird or Operation Mockingbird. No, Project Mockingbird, or yeah, let's go with that. So they say, oh, well, the use of chemical weapons are a violation of the Geneva Convention protocols. Now, obviously, I personally believe that chemical weapons are terrible, they're violent, they shouldn't be used, they're an inhumane way to kill people. But at the same time, isn't killing people in general kind of this primeval law that we've deduced? I mean, killing people in general is morally wrong. Whether you do it with drone strikes, whether you do it subliminally, not subliminally, whether you do it premeditatedly, whether you do it spontaneously, accidentally, slowly, quickly, hot or cold, murder is murder. There's no other way to divide it. It's like dividing by zero. You just can't do it. At any rate, somebody in the end is still dying, and in this case, multiple people, as with Obama's drone strikes. But, why would Obama even bat an eye at this point? I mean, he seems so desensitized with drone striking since he was admitted into office, about 4,700 people, mostly being collateral damage, which, I mean, if we're taking out terrorists, then of course, why not just kill people as a result who are innocent? I mean, it makes sense. You're now guilty until proven innocent. So it makes much sense according to the logic and doctrines of government. Now let's jump into the true meat and potatoes of Kerry's responses here during this Senate hearing, because I find so many of them absolutely comical to a degree that I just couldn't pass this up. Now I feel so passionately about these, I just had to jump right into them. So he said, quote, "In order to protect our sources and methods, some of what we know will only be released to members of Congress. Some things we do know we can't talk about publicly." So aka in layman's terms, other than this ambiguous federal language, he's pretty much saying that, well, we don't have any tangible evidence to produce a justification or pretext for the intervention into Syria. So instead, we're going to kind of show and masquerade these elusive and fake imaginary blank documents, and from that, we're going to use that as some type of credibility, some type of justification to intervene in Syria and meddle with foreign affairs. So that's John Kerry's logic, the Secretary of State. Such great logic, isn't it? So, what else did he say other than that? Oh yeah, he heralded this message and parroted the mainstream media when he says, "Oh, well, we could give you these classified documents, but if we do, then it would be jeopardizing national security." When did we hear that? Well, it sounds a lot familiar, or very akin, to Edward Snowden. He was supposed to release all this information on the NSA, but instead he was prosecuted by the federal government because, oh well, seeing that Americans might be surveilled on a daily basis ubiquitously, that might jeopardize national security, which is completely false, because if it actually did jeopardize national security, then we, the American people, as well as people and terrorists in foreign countries, would actually know the true implications of this intelligence and information at large. But instead of truly facing the reality of this, seeing that we have no justifiable pretext to intervene in Syria, the American people are just kind of pulling the wool over their eyes, putting the blinders on and saying, well, this doesn't affect me, therefore I will be indifferent to evil because it doesn't really matter. I'd just much rather sit down, watch a Sunday football game or Miley Cyrus twerking on the VMAs on loop on YouTube. It doesn't affect me, therefore I don't care. And that is the same type of indifference, folks, that fueled the Holocaust. It is extremely volatile, quite literally. And lastly, when Kerry was about to lie, he actually said, "Oh, we'll discuss that tomorrow in a confidential meeting," not verbatim, but that's pretty much his excuse for the majority of questions that he couldn't answer. Instead of saying, "I don't know," instead of lying, he'd actually say, "Well, we're holding this confidential congressional meeting tomorrow," meaning today, and from that, he pretty much again just excused himself from answering any questions, having any type of culpability or responsibility in these pretty scary questions that were proposed by Congress. And all these liberal outlets were saying, "Oh, well, Kerry, he wasn't asked hard questions." Yeah, he wasn't asked hard questions, but he was asked questions that he couldn't even answer, and he was sweating bullets and cruise missiles at the same time. And during these congressional meetings as well, I thought up, and it makes sense to me, that I don't really think they deliberate on the true root of the problem, being the imminent U.S. militarization in Syria, militarism in Egypt, but instead I think they kind of just discuss implementations of propaganda that they could use in the media, and pretty much just dish out White House talking points and bribe Congress members, and it's really disgusting. So, continuing on even further, taking all that into consideration, I was really wondering, in light of all this, while John Kerry is the Secretary of State, where in the world is Obama? Because it seems like he's either vacationing, as I've previously mentioned, in Martha's Vineyard or Africa, and maybe he's even golfing. Who knows? He's missed meetings and briefings on Syria in the past due to golf outings, so, maybe that's where he is. Who really knows? But Obama's one of the main beaters of these war drums next to John Kerry, and I think he should be accountable and have to answer to these interrogative questions of Congress instead of just kind of eluding this idea and trying to give justification to intervene when he's the main perpetrator and the main person wanting to do this, yet he doesn't have to answer to anybody. He has no credibility, or he doesn't have any type of oversight, really. And this was kind of a scarier thing that I was thinking about during the course of all this too, and my sister really got me, she kind of provoked the thought process here, but it's kind of this really in-depth possibility that may actually unfold. I don't have any inside intelligence, but it actually makes sense to me, at least, and I'm not trying to espouse some conspiracy here, but I do think that it is inside the realm of possibility. So if we do decide, and when I say we, I'm collectivizing the government, not the American people by any means, if we do decide to go into Syria and stomp down our combat boots on Egyptian soil, then what does that mean for America? Because if all our military is abroad, policing abroad in foreign countries such as Egypt, then where is our military here at home? Do we have any type of line of defense? And especially when the administration's saying we want to intervene into Syria during the week of 9/11, it may just be a coincidence, but equally so, I find it pretty nerve-wracking, at least, that if our military is abroad and we have no line of defense here at home domestically, then what happens when the Al-Qaeda operatives in Egypt get PO'd and then they say, "Oh, well, we're going to bomb America, institute a second 9/11 or something of that magnitude," and if they don't, maybe that would give the United States government justification or the ability to sell people on a false flag terror attack to be executed and then blamed on Al-Qaeda operatives as the scapegoats and patsies. It makes a lot of sense to me. Whether it's reasonable or not, that's really for you guys to decide. But it seems like we're just going to kind of obliterate people abroad and not really care about ourselves here at home. But folks, the plot thickens even more because, as I think I might have mentioned before, these Syrian chemical weapon attacks have actually been going on for decades. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I said it, since the 1970s. And when people say, even the USA Today has released articles saying that this has been going on, this chemical warfare has been going on for decades now, when these type of outlets, even run by the government, are covering this type of stuff, it really makes you wonder, to what extent has America gone down the tubes if these paid agencies are relaying this information to the American public just openly, really, at this point. And in light of all this, too, John Kerry continues to entertain this subjective rationale he has that it's 110% fact now that the Assad regime is not only actively utilizing these chemical weapons, but also is possessing the largest arsenal in the Middle East, which I find gigglesome because maybe you guys don't remember. Maybe I don't really necessarily remember because I wasn't alive, but in 1992 there was this flight to Tel Aviv, Israel, it was flight number 1862, and that aircraft was actually loaded with 190 liters of Schedule II chemical weapons. So is Syria here in the Middle East the true resident of all these chemical weapons, or is it really Israel? We don't really know. And then I was thinking along the lines of this chemical warfare, this genetic engineering, and I was thinking maybe that's true in the Middle East for Israel or Syria, but here in the Western world, I think the United States possesses the most chemical weapons because we have HAARP, High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, located in Gakona, Alaska, that can modify the weather and probably rain down some type of chemical weaponry. And if not, we also have geoengineering, chemtrails. Whether you subscribe to that conspiracy theory or not, it's still possibly reasonable, plausible. And lastly, we have this company that's now kind of grown as some branch of the government that is called Monsanto, who produces the majority of genetically modified organisms in the United States and really across the world, unless they're banned, like in some countries in Europe. But we in America truly are formulating this genetically modified society of chemical weaponry, and it's been leading to many deaths through diseases such as cancer, tumors, infertility, etc. Now, back to roasting Kerry here for just a second. I suppose he has actually procured some type of rational and tangible evidence throughout all this, because he said, we know that all hell broke loose in social media, people twitching with spasms, coughing, rapid heartbeats, foaming at the mouth, unconsciousness, and death. Now, he was referring to some of the photos and videos posted on Twitter and Facebook, obviously mediums of social media out there. And when he's saying that, it really makes you question, because the administration, the government, really the mainstream media in general, seems to often condemn social media as this avenue for conspiracy theorists who aren't really journalists because they're just bloggers, and terrorists and all these terrible people out there, when truly they are just people talking. But when the government, when the administration is actually surveilling through the NSA and censoring and even provoking some of the violence in social media, then you're wondering, well, what type of evidence is this? Is it legitimate evidence, or has it just been posted by the government? So for John Kerry to use some type of social media as evidence, as a pretext, as justification for institution of war on foreign soil is absolutely ludicrous. I mean, what extent has the government gone down the tubes? It's insane. It still boggles my mind. And even so, continuing on, that they say, oh, well, social media, we have all this evidence. But if they do have all this evidence, like John Kerry claims, then why don't they truly declassify some of these spooky papers that they claim to have that, again, are just truly invisible and non-existent? But, we can't tell the American people the truth. They are undeserving, and it is too volatile, too atrocious for them to even comprehend, fathom, or handle. And yet another broken spool in this spider web of trickery that Obama and Kerry have been creating is that the metrics, the sheer statistics of this impending war on Syria that's already evolved through this chemical warfare, Kerry said that the United States government now knows for a fact, of course that's the word of the day that he was using, that at least 1,492 Syrians were killed in this attack, Well, let's take a peek now at the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights Unbiased Statistics, because they actually weighed in at a shocking 322 casualties, opposed to Kerry's five-fold multiplied digit that he miraculously procured somewhere in his non-existent brain to somehow fuel public support for the war in Syria. So again, Kerry just seems to be trying to expedite and further fear and warmonger this attack to be held in Syria for whatever political agenda he's trying to achieve, as well as with Obama and the rest of the administration that's trying to profit off of this somehow. And when, and it's not really a question of if at this point, but when the U.S. military starts occupying its troops in Syria, for a fact, on Syrian soil, then I don't think the administration is truly considering, even fathoming, the repercussions that this may have, because if Syria decides to shroud their weapons like they did in Iraq, not Syria, but in Iraq, nuclear weapons and these WMDs that were non-existent, but if these chemical weapons are actually shrouded and hidden strategically in the basements of schools or airports or what else, hospitals, then is the United States Lady Liberty still going to ignite a fuse to the war of the battlefield over there? Because if that does indeed happen, then the United States is pretty much just going to evolve to be this poster child for international terrorism, and we're going to be seen as these terrible people, which historically we truly are. But again, it's this division that people abroad have to realize, that we the American people don't unanimously support this intervention in Syria. Instead, the government that is no longer representative and a republic, they're the ones making the decisions here. It's truly a dictatorship and this oligarchy of people making decisions, not indeed the public. And lastly, with that said, boys and girls, just don't forget that this foreign entanglement of U.S. affairs, if you don't support it, then you are anti-democracy, and likewise you are supposed to be juxtaposed as anti-American. That is actually something I heard, not verbatim, but close enough to what CNN said the other day, the CNN talking head pundit mouthpiece, that said, you're not American if you oppose this intervention, this war, this intermingling of affairs in Syria. How crazy is that? How hot has the rhetoric gotten that these pundits and talking heads on the mainstream media are actually saying this openly? Talk about a free country, man. But even further, John Kerry, Barack Obama, really anybody in this whole cabal of elitists in the government, they seem to be these fortune tellers here, these gypsies who hold a glittering crystal ball to the not-so-glittering future, because it's our civil duty as human beings, as Americans, as, again, just human beings, to take action here, and we need to wrestle for this crystal ball that these elitists are holding, but we need to take control over it before it hits the floor and shatters all over the place, and before our reality here as Americans, as human beings, is fragmented, because if it shatters, folks, then we are living in a crazy time, a crazy nation. But this is history. Hopefully in the coming days, this intervention in Syria won't indeed materialize, but I wouldn't be surprised if it is. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Andrew Demeter reporting on September 4th, 2013 on behalf of Teen Take. Signing out. I will see you guys next episode.